you can do everything right, but you cannot control development. You can support development for kids, but you can't control what your child is going to do all the time, and we can't micromanage what they eat. We see this sort of phenomenon called like food jagging, which essentially is burnout. And that is where, parents will say to me, but they've had Weetabix every day for the last year. And I'm like, and now they're bored. Now they're done. They've burnt out. There needs to be a change. So sometimes even being able to rotate through things, have a pause with the yogurt, offer it at a different time of day, serve it in a different way, might just be enough to reset. But they're fickle. My daughter's exactly the same at the moment.
Oh, really?
Loves it 1 minute, next minute. What is it? No.
Lucy, welcome to the podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here today. You've recently published your new book, haven't you? The Ultimate Guide to Children's Nutrition, which was recently released.
I have, yeah.
Can you start off then by telling us a little bit about what led you to specialise in children's nutrition?
So I specialised in children's nutrition sort of well over 15 years ago now. So I basically did my degree in sort of nutrition and dietetics. So that's 4 years. And by the end of the 4 years, I was like, I don't think I want to work with adults.
Right.
And I was lured and very drawn to the idea that actually I could have a role with children at a time really where it could have such a profound impact on not just their life right now, but really their life going forward. And I really do believe, and I'm sure we'll echo throughout this podcast today, that, sort of what we do early, it just has a ripple effect on the rest of life. And I loved working with kids. And I mean, I know I said no parents. So I work with parents every day. I work with adults. And so, that was me. And there's a bit of a joke in the kind of paediatrics arena, like not just nutrition actually, and lots of different specialities, that if you go down the route of working in paediatrics and with children, you don't ever go back. Right. And I haven't met anyone yet.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Yeah. So this is me dedicating life to kids, really.
Yeah. Oh, well, I love that. And I love the book. I've read the book, obviously.
Yeah.
And there's just so much useful information in there. It really is a great guide, isn't it?
Yeah. We wanted a Bible. I say we, me. But when I was sort of pitching it and deciding what to write, because there's lots of information out there. There's not a lot from dietitians, actually, which is, quite unique in that sort of our level of expertise is sort of, I think people misunderstand actually what we do. But I wanted something that, I recognise with parents that particularly in those early years, a lot changes very quickly. You just about get used to milk feeds, and then you've got weaning, and then you've just about got kind of weaning under your belt, and all of a sudden you've got a toddler. And I sort of wanted something, I was quite firm about the fact I wanted something that came along with parents along the way. It wasn't meant to be like just boom, one hit wonder for a period of time and then we're done. And I think that comes with the ability for people to be able to read ahead and know what's coming for them in a good way, and go, okay, so when things happen or change, that you've got that information, and it's, it's written very much with parents in mind, years of working with parents, speaking their language, knowing what worries them, what doesn't, but then also bringing in all those topics that we see and we hear all over social media now that can feel quite intimidating as parents, ultra-processed foods, gut health, brain health, food relationships. It can feel like, hold on a minute, this suddenly feels, how am I going to get this right? So, I just chucked it all in one book.
Absolutely. I love that. But you're right. Like there's so many phases that come along and change, and you just start to feel equipped, and then you're on to the next one.
And then it moves. And then it moves. And I think it's about, being able, I just wanted to be able to hold people's hand the whole way through. And it doesn't stop at 5 because there's a whole new world when you get into that. But, we'll see what happens next.
Room for a next one.
Room for a next one.
So there is obviously so much conflicting advice out there for parents. How do you help parents then feel confident about feeding their children?
I think for me, it's always about, a big part of what I do is about helping parents land with what's going on with their children, because it's really easy to view eating, drinking, feeding through the same lens that we do as parents and as adults. And let's face it, we've got years of experience with food, years. They haven't. And they're also going through these huge developmental shifts on such a regular basis that actually it's about being able to go, this is why your child is doing what they're doing now. This is why, this is what nutrition is important, and this is how we get it in. This is, developmentally, you think of the toddler years and you go, they're not trying to annoy you. They're not trying to be hard work. They're not being picky on purpose. When you understand that actually, new things that are unfamiliar feel really intimidating, and that's part of their development, and that they have this push and desire for control. And when you think about the fact you might be feeding a child 5-6 times a day and they have no input with that, that they're clutching at the table for control. It really lets parents kind of view what's going on with their kids and how they're feeding kind of through their children's eyes. And there's a lot more, therefore, empathy and acceptance for where they're at. And actually, for me, often that's the first jigsaw puzzle piece for helping parents relax and reduce kind of pressure or persuasion or their own stress.
Yeah.
You know, because lots of people will say to me, I just feel like I'm a bad parent, I'm a failure. I look at social media and I see these plates and these what I eat in a day videos, and you sit and you look and you go, my child doesn't eat anything like that. And then it makes you think that that's only that's good enough, and therefore you're a complete and utter rubbish mum. And that's so far from the truth.
Yeah.
And often when I see people one-to-one and I look at what's going on, I'm like, they're doing loads better than you think they are. They're eating loads more than you think they are. But you're comparing to aspirational, which is what social media is on so many levels a lot of the time, isn't it?
Yeah, you're so right. We kind of see, don't we, these beautiful caterpillar sandwiches and all things like that.
I haven't got time for that.
A bowl of cereal, which is the one thing they've agreed to eat for breakfast.
Yeah, that gets demonised. And I'm like, let's not demonise cereal for kids, you know, like full of vitamins and minerals, fibre. Let's, you know, not get our paintbrushes out with these foods. And exactly that, like, it kind of comes into that, like, guys, which is really important for me, full stop, whenever I speak with families. You know, there's no such thing as perfect parenting. There's no such, and the same goes with feeding your kids. You know, I know so many parents who come out of weaning, they're like, I've nailed it. I did everything the books say. Look at them, they eat kale. And I'm like, yeah, they do now. And I don't mean that in any way to be dismissive or to undermine, but it's to recognise that actually you can do everything right.
Yeah.
But you cannot control development. You can support development for kids, but you can't control what your child is going to do all the time. And we can't micromanage what they eat. And there's a bit of like letting go of that as parents, which I think is important in that dynamic around feeding.
Yeah. So it's developmentally normal, from what I understand, that they do start off weaning and they're quite open to trying everything, aren't they?
Yeah.
And then they go into this fussy stage, don't they? Which is, again, developmentally normal, isn't it?
Yeah. And of course, there's a spectrum with that. And we can sort of talk about that today. But, you know, when you think about kind of a baby between 6 to kind of 10 to 12 months, their development is primed to learn to eat. And I always go back to weaning is learning to eat. In the same way children learn to talk, learn to walk, developmental milestone, eating isn't innate. Like, they don't just know what they're doing. Yeah. And so they've got to learn that. And so development is beautifully primed at that time when you've got to learn this big complex skill to be like, try it, eat it, taste it. Oh, bitter. All right, I'll have some more. Suck on that lemon. Yeah. You know, like, so it's primed to support learning to eat, as in progression with different tastes, progression with different textures. Yeah. And children will be curious. They've also got very high energy demands when they're young, like higher than any other time in your life ever. Yeah. Like, it's remarkable when you work out how many calories per kilogram a baby would need. Really? So, you know, they're going for it. Yeah. And it's not uncommon for me to say, you know, hear parents say to me, you know, my 10-month-old is eating more than my 3-year-old. Yeah. And that feels counterintuitive because bigger child. Yeah. But actually the amount of energy they need and how they eat is going to be so very different. And they hit a transition, you know, at one, you know, you will see quite a lot flip. So they don't need as much energy per kilogram to grow. Development is pushing in other directions. They are going to usually somewhere around 18 to 24 months, we will see lots of children go through a food neophobic phase where they're like, what is that? No. And typically that is with foods that are less predictable or would be kind of a risk if we were to think about it in caveman times. Like something that's bitter in nature isn't normally a good sign, right? You know, so bitter vegetables, you know, and meat and mixed dishes, you know, we go, well, it's bolognese. And they're like, well, what the hell is I don't know what that is. You know, they're 2. What do you mean it's bolognese? That means nothing to me. All I see is wet mixed textures and my brain can't work out what that is or if it's safe.
I think one of the things that parents can find tricky is that they used to eat it, isn't it? That it might be a common dish that you've served. Like I've got an 18-month-year-old and she's always loved yogurt with banana, yogurt with avocado. Lately, she just won't touch it. But I'm like, but you've eaten this for 6 months. And now you don't want to know.
Now you don't want to know. And that's our logical brain. That's our prefrontal cortex. It's so hard when you're a parent not to say, but I did this with my daughter last week. You literally ate that breakfast yesterday and today you're like, it's disgusting.
Yeah, she won't even let it near her mouth.
No, and you you want to be like, but you do like it, but they can't remember, they can't reason, they can't use logic. And I always go back to, young children live in their body and live in the moment. How is this experience feeling? What do I want to do now? Not, I'll compare it. Oh yeah, I do like it. I will eat it. They're just in the here and now, landing right where you're at.
Yeah.
And actually that negotiation, all the things that we can tip into because we have our own emotions and frustration about it, can sometimes set us back a bit. The other thing is that they are fickle, and they do also, we see this sort of phenomenon called like food jagging, which essentially is burnout. And that is where, parents will say to me, but they've had Weetabix every day for the last year. And I'm like, and now they're bored. Now they're done. They've burnt out. There needs to be a change. So sometimes even being able to rotate through things, have a pause with the yogurt, offer it at a different time of day, serve it in a different way, might just be enough to reset. But they're fickle. My daughter's exactly the same at the moment.
Oh, really?
Loves it 1 minute, next minute. What is it? No, we'll give it to me, take it off her plate, and it's so hard. But I'm like, I'm an adult and she's a child. Again, landing back down in what's going on for them, and also, it's really hard, I think, not to take it personally. Isn't it?
Absolutely. Well, you've put the time and effort into preparing the meal. Or sometimes you've done your food shop. It's like, what else do I now offer? I've prepped this meal and you don't want to eat it. So you've got to find something quickly that they're going to have as an alternative. Something that as well you want to feel is nutritious and going to be beneficial to them rather than just a piece of toast.
I mean, and sometimes I'm like, bring that piece of toast to the meal. Like, honestly, sometimes when, in the thick of really struggling, and it feels so counterintuitive to lots of people, because we do this with puddings as well, particularly puddings have become that, I don't want that, I want my pudding, bring a small amount of that food alongside the main meal. And yes, they will eat it first, probably. But over time, what you see is children not eat it first and also be much more willing to engage back with
the
meal.
Okay.
So sometimes I'll bring those things in and, I think sometimes someone said to me, actually a few weeks ago, they were like, that's you being permissive. And I was like, it isn't. Because if you were going to give that pudding or that food anyway, it doesn't matter. But if you're going, here's a quarter of a piece of toast alongside the pasta, the bolognese, whatever, and your child is engaging with that and it's familiar and they feel safe, they are much more likely to then continue to engage with that meal.
Okay, that's a really good tip.
And that does require us as adults to be okay with the fact, be a bit more food neutral, because we probably grew up, pudding was the thing that was earned, wasn't it? Or the special treat, the thing on a pedestal. And actually, so we've learned that as we go through life, and it can be hard to kind of unwrite that for the sort of benefit of our kids' sort of relationship with food and also progress with food. And, I just always say to people, it doesn't matter if you're going to give it anyway.
No,
it doesn't matter at what point in that meal it's offered. So.
Okay, so fussy eating obviously is a real stress for so many parents. How do we handle fussy eating then when they go through that phase or stay in that phase without getting into a battle?
The big thing to begin with will be stepping away from any battle. So I think, I always go back to basics with parents and go, we need to make mealtimes a nice place to be and a place where your child feels safe. And I know that the word safe feels really big when it comes to feeding. And everyone's like, what do you mean safe? Dad said to me once, not a lion's den, Lucy. And I was like, well, safety is something that is felt, not told. Right? I could be like, you feel safe, and there's like a bear at the door, and you'd be like, no, Lucy, whatever you say. And if mealtimes have become a place that is fractious, that is that power control, that battlefield, because that's what that battle is, exactly what you're describing. Just apply for control. No, you can have one more bite. No, I don't want to. We'll have a bite of this. It's just push-pull with control. If a child has had like negative experiences around the mealtime, there've been lots of pressure, if they've got a history. I see lots of children who've had a history of, vomiting, reflux, food allergies, discomfort around food in the mealtime. They're not going to come to the table feeling safe and enjoying it. So it comes back to safety, which is things like making mealtimes predictable, not sitting there necessarily too long, sitting with them and creating connection rather than confrontation or kind of control. Having some foods that that they will eat there, particularly if they're quite, and that's not bring the whole packet of bourbon biscuits and go, it's half a biscuit is, we've got an accepted food on the table for you. We recognise that you're finding eating hard work at the moment. There's something here that's familiar. Because often you'll get children who will look at everything and be like, don't want any of that. Goodbye. Oh no, I don't want that. I want that. So have something there that they like. And, it does also go back to children will do very well with things that are modelled to them rather than told.
Right.
So, this is hard because we're all really busy parents these days, and time is of the essence always, and we're really time poor, and often both parents are back at work, and I say wherever you can, you want to eat with your kids.
Right,
and everyone, I get eye rolls, I get all sorts when people say, oh yeah, no, I know. I cannot tell you the profound impact it has. And it doesn't have to be perfect. And it's not this white picket fence, lovely pictures. They're stressful, they're messy, they're unpredictable sometimes. But children will do what they see, not what they're told. And you model safety with that food. You model what to do with that food. Even if they don't bring it to their plate, they're exposed to it. They've got opportunity to engage with it. And that pays dividends in the long run. Okay. It really does. And, interestingly, family meals also seem to have this huge impact on lots of other things, like a child's risk of things like self-harming when they're an adolescent and eating disorders. And, it is a time where you come back and you talk and you connect and you can pick up on what's going on, especially as kids get older, you're touching base. Yes. Those base touches sort of become thinner and thinner, don't they? Because they don't want to spend time with you. Yeah. So it's about creating, calm, comfort, connection at the table, having something there that they'll eat, remembering that exposure and that opportunity needs to be there. And that progress is often quiet. So, when I say to parents, what would your goal be? They'll be like, to eat a roast dinner. And I'm like, that's a big ask. Yeah. Because that's a very complex meal of tastes, textures, covered in wet, usually, like gravy. I think I was about 30 when I started eating gravy to my roast dinner. And actually, progress is the quiet moments of they're more comfortable at the table and they're happier and they feel safe. You might not notice that as a big overt sort of sign that they're making progress, or it can be touching food or even talking or being curious about your food. That is a sign that they're feeling safe and they're starting to be interested. Yeah. And that's what you want to see. It won't necessarily be the big grand, I'm finishing my bolognese. Yeah. That will come in time. But, it's hard because I say to parents, if there was a magic wand, I could tell you to do these 5 things and then next week everything's different. There'll be some very rich person somewhere one day if they could do that. But it's a bit of a long game.
So do we really want to be sticking to 3 meals a day then? Or is it okay if they do prefer to graze?
So I would say children do well with predictability and routine, and appetite does well with that too, in terms of anchoring in opportunities to eat. So young children will generally do well with kind of eating opportunities every 2 to 3, and then as they get a bit older, maybe 4 hours. So that generally looks like, 3 meals, 2 snacks-ish a day. Each child will be different. The problem with grazing is if you have, I'm going to have, a veggie straws, and then I'm going to have a banana, and then I'm going to have this, and then you get to lunch, and actually they're not hungry. Yeah. And then the lunch gets refused, and then you're like, oh, okay, they've refused their lunch, and then they're asking for food again an hour later, and then it's sort of drip feeding it throughout the day is actually, they're just sort of gently topping up their energy requirements throughout the day. And actually when you're landing them at a mealtime, they're like, may or may not be hungry. And often they're not. The same goes for things like milk volumes. I see this quite a lot too. And because children are so good at regulating their appetite, because they really will be back in their body, listening to their appetite, they're not just going to eat it because it's lunchtime. Yeah. We do that. We might do that as adults. Like I might have had the biggest breakfast, but I'm like, it's lunchtime. And all my cognitive override is being like, it's lunchtime, you need to eat. Whereas young kids are going to be like, I'm not hungry. Yeah. And you're like, but it's lunchtime. Yeah. And they're like, but I'm not hungry. I have a mouthful and I'm gone. Thank you very much. So I do tend to say be mindful of, grazing. And I also a big fan of reframing snack time, right? Because I feel like snacks become synonymous with certain types of food, right? And there are no rules. Like you could do a tiny deconstructed bit of last night's dinner for a snack, a couple of pieces of pasta, a tablespoonful of bolognese, and I don't know, some cucumber sticks or something. Yeah. There are no rules, but I think it's interesting because we live in a society and a culture where like snack is synonymous with particular types of foods.
You're so right. In my household, it's a biscuit or a bag of crisps.
Or crisps or a cereal bar or, dry cereal or whatever it might be. And actually we can, again, reframe what we might put in at those times. Yeah. And I've got children, for example, might be, fussy eater, where I'll say, by the end of the day, often children are tired, they're dysregulated, we're giving them the most trickiest meal. Actually, can we do some of the exposure and opportunity with some of those foods earlier in the day? Yeah. When they're a bit more regulated, perhaps not, eaten so much so far, and perhaps we might be in a better place to kind of engage with it.
Yeah, I agree with that, starting it earlier in the day. I definitely think by the end of the day, they've kind of not got the bandwidth to explore new things, have they?
No,
they just either want to eat and
they're knackered. But it's again that parental shift of mindset. when you think about your evening meal, you think it's probably your biggest meal of the day, right?
Yeah.
And it's the good meal. It's the one where all the vegetables are there. It's one where the protein's there. You know, that tends to be the meal, doesn't it? But there are no rules with kids. You can bring some of that earlier in the day. I've got kids who have fish fingers for breakfast.
Really? Yeah. Okay.
And I'm like, food is just food.
Yeah.
I'm very cool with that.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter. We sort of get aware of those social norms and routines, and actually we don't have to play by those necessarily. And I've got kids.
I guess that's it, isn't it? Sometimes reframing our own thoughts and feelings around food, because it can be very triggering for us as parents, the way our children eat. Yep. And that's sometimes the biggest battle, isn't it? Is reframing that so that we can attend to their needs more appropriately.
I mean, arguably, that's one of the biggest parts of my job sometimes.
Really?
It's really, really normal that your child's eating activates you. And my question to parents is always, why?
Yeah.
What is this? Why? It's a hard question because the mirror holds hard as a parent, right? But it is an important piece of work because, for example, when I'm looking at, let's say, again, I've got another child who's quite a selective eater and we might be in a pattern of, topping up with foods, like lots of rescue meals or alternatives or, why? What's worrying you? Often there's sort of common themes, they're going to lose weight. That's just the way it's done.
Yeah.
And one of the big ones that comes out through the research is people are going to judge me.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Particularly for mothers.
Yeah.
Which I don't think is surprising.
No.
Because there is, one, a lot of that, unfortunately. And two, as I say, whilst there is no award for being perfect parent because there's no such thing, the reality is that, if your child's the one at soft play who's having 6 chicken nuggets whilst Bobby next to them is like chowing down on his 5 veg tagine, don't you?
Yeah, you do.
You do.
You do feel like there's a piece of you that's failed that you've managed to expose or get your child to enjoy the good stuff as well as the less optimal stuff.
Rarely, it's not a parent's fault. And this is it. There's always something. There is a story that's happened for that child. There's stuff going on for that child. I always say they're not giving you a hard time around food. They're just having a hard time for whatever reason. And that could be multiple reasons. And it is really important that as parents, we just go, what's going on for me? Because we do have to address that bit.
Yeah.
Because when I can bring parents' stress levels down, the good work happens.
That's really
They always see most progress.
Yeah.
And it is hard. I had a mum the other day and she was like, I just, I started to realise that I've, just been chasing a diagnosis when the reality is that I should have just been paying attention to what was going on in front of me and doing what I can with that, rather than being like, well, I can't do anything until I know exactly what is going on and we need something attached to that. And I understand why diagnoses are really important for people and children in a variety of different scenarios. They really are, because they can open doors, and it's essential that children get those doors open for support. But certainly when it comes to feeding, there's always something we could be doing now. And I'm staunchly believe that. So, it is hard as adults, isn't it? Also, that's what we grew up with, right?
Yeah.
Even I have to be like, why do I think that?
Yeah. I find it really triggering when I've bothered to make something and it outright gets refused before it's even been tried.
Yeah. No,
my son is the worst for that. He judges everything on the way that it looks.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but you haven't even tried it. And when you're like, I could guarantee that it's a smoothie that's just had a strawberry put in it instead of mango, which you like, which is just giving it a slight tinge of pink rather than yellow. Please try it, but it's outright refused. And I find that different. I really have to think to myself, just let it go, let it go. But I find it really hard.
Yeah, it is. And I talk to parents a lot about managing that. That particular scenario, because it is. I have these funny graphs actually, like they are, there's a bit satire really, but I honestly believe the harder we try sometimes as parents, the meal where you spent an hour in the kitchen, you'd be like, and I'm going to cut it and I'm going to present it really beautifully. That's the one that totally dive bombs, isn't it? And you're like, why do I bother? Almost the more effort that's put in, the more likely it is to be refused. I'm sure they smell it off us, the desperation, don't they? Well, they probably do. Like all those cues we're giving them, like, please. But I actually say to lots of parents, particularly with things like meals and stuff like that, is sometimes in those moments, we need to be okay with the fact that they may go no. They might. And we can logic it again all we want. We can provide all of the justification. They don't care. They don't want to do it right now. And they certainly don't want to do it if they've been told or asked to do this. They want to do it of their own call it intrinsic motivation. Children will always do better when they're doing something because they want to do it.
Yes.
Not external motivators.
Yeah.
But with mealtimes, I say to parents, and I regularly give this bit of advice, if you're cooking a meal you're going to share with your kids, cook something you want to eat.
Right.
Because we're so used to catering. And yes, you might need to make sure part of that meal is plain pasta or plain rice or something, a wrap, something on the table that you know that your kids are going to eat. But actually, look after yourself. Like, you need to eat too. You need to enjoy meals too. You don't need to have mac and cheese for the 6th time this week. You can choose to eat, and kids pick up on that. They pick up on food enjoyment. They pick up on, oh, this is different. And you can be like, yeah, Mummy used to always have this when she was at university. It's really nostalgic for me. It's, well, mine would be a pot noodle. It's probably not that. But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Something that you care about. And actually, children will normally pick up on that sort of thing. And doesn't mean they'll eat it, but they may well be curious and might be more likely to explore it. But
okay, so come back to that modelling again.
Come back to modelling, but also being okay with looking after yourself in the scheme of it.
Yeah.
And picking up on moments that you need your cup filling around food.
Which mothers are particularly bad at,
very bad
in
at.
all areas.
Yes, correct.
Parenting.
They are very, very bad at that.
So what do you suggest then if your child refuses to eat all vegetables? Should we sneak them into pasta sauces or just accept that they're not going to eat them?
Okay, I suppose there's a few things I normally say to parents. So the first is, vegetables have been given like the upper echelon of like, Ma, you're a great parent if your kid eats veg. And it always makes me smile because they're the hardest foods.
Yeah.
They're so unpredictable. Loads of them are quite bitter. If I ask parents to honestly tell me when they started enjoying kale, avocado, like all these things that are now seen as the pinnacle of like, you've got a great eater. Oh my God, most parents are like 20.
Yeah,
30.
so right, yeah.
I don't,
Yeah.
So actually, let's just have a minute and remember that these are more difficult foods because of how they look, because of how they taste. Also, like sometimes even how we serve them. I've got one dad who I work with who's a chef, and he's just insistent that it's just like, I need to just put garlic on everything and or roast it instead of doing it steamed and thinking about the way perhaps that we're preparing it. But the reality is they're hard foods for kids. They will be some of the last things to come in terms of enjoyment, for many, many children. And also, if your child is eating fruit, the likelihood is that they will be getting almost all of the same nutrients. And I feel like fruit gets pitched below vegetables.
Yeah.
And it really makes me smile because studies resoundingly show that a diet that's rich in fruit is a very good health supportive diet. Obviously, because there's fiber, there's fluid, there's antioxidants, there's a range of different vitamins and minerals, but they get pitched below because it's sweet.
I was going to say, why is that? Because of the sugar?
Well, yeah, and don't worry about that. Honestly, I tell parents, we can't get into that, again, micromanaging of like, it's natural sugar, which is contained within cell walls. Fruit is good for you. Fruit is good for your kids. It's fantastic source of all of those nutrients, especially because children don't like lots of vegetables a lot of the time. That will come. And it isn't, again, a kind of marker of how good your parenting is or how well you did at weaning. It is just kids. They're harder foods. In terms of hiding them or including them, I personally have no problem with including, like, blend some veg into tomato sauce, okay? I would call that including rather than hiding. The one thing I would say is that I always apply honesty with it. So if you've done tomato and vegetable sauce, you need to call it tomato and vegetable sauce in my mind. Because there will be a moment where kids realise something is different or you've added something or they find out or they see it. And what you risk losing is trust.
Yeah.
Because they're like, well, what's in all of these things? I didn't want that. I'm not in control of that. You haven't been honest with me. And trust is really important in that dyad between a parent and a child around food. So, being honest can help. Yes, we all want to get extra veg in. We're all going to do it. We're going to blend it, chop it small, grate it, whatever. That's absolutely fine. Don't also forget to keep showing whatever those foods are in different forms. Like your child won't learn to eat courgette if it's only ever grated in a muffin. What they like is muffin.
Yeah.
Like they don't yet like courgette, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like they've got to see it in other forms. So yes, integrate it, but be honest, model and show eating that food, veg in other forms. And just remember things like fruit count too,
Oh, well, that's good to know because I've got one child that does eat some veg.
Yeah.
One who refuses, but he'll eat lots of fruit.
Yeah.
So he will just have a very basic dinner.
Yeah.
But then he'll have a portion of fruit on the side. I'm like, well, it's as good as we're going to get.
That's fine. And it's still nutrients. And it's antioxidants. They're in the same food group for a reason. Fruits and vegetables. Yeah. Like, I always tell parents that, and they're like, okay. Like, phew. And again, I think it's just that navigating all of that information, isn't it? Because we've been told like fruit is bad and blood sugar levels and all this other stuff that honestly we don't need to concern ourselves with at all and shouldn't be with kids.
Great. Okay. So how much should we worry about sugar and all the treats that constantly get offered to children through relatives or parties or like in my household, my husband?
Is he the feeder?
Oh, absolutely.
So it's definitely a balance, isn't it? Because we need to consider this. I look at this with a sort of two view. We need to consider health, particularly teeth, when you come to things like, sugar, sweets. But also we very much want to preserve a child's long-term relationship with foods. And the reality is with lots of those sweet foods, they get given a pedestal. They're the things that are earned if you eat your peas. Everyone's like, oh, who wants some chocolate? No one goes, oh, who wants some broccoli? Do they? Like, so we make it a big deal.
I find lots of people when they come to visit the kids will bring something and they're like, oh, so it is a reward from day one. Yeah, it's really hard to fight against that.
It is hard to fight against that. So I tend to say, in order to kind of like neutralise, we can't necessarily change how everyone's going to behave around those foods, right? But what matters most, I think, is what we consistently do at home.
Right.
And I would say keeping neutral about those foods, like call them what they are. It's chocolate, it's cake, it's sweets, right? It's not like, oh, it's a special treat, because throughout their whole life, it's a special treat. Yeah. Or something that's restricted or earned or bribed with. Actually, let's just give it a neutral playing field and not make it a big deal. Offer it alongside other foods whenever you decide as parents, right? Like you can decide we're going to have brownies tonight with dinner. Yeah. And everyone can eat it and enjoy it, and it's not a big deal, and it's not conditional on whatever's been eaten for the first course. What we're trying to do is just bring that pedestal down and just neutralize it as much as possible. And I say as much as possible because these foods are designed to be palatable, probably overconsumed because they're so palatable. The taste and texture is meant so we keep going back for more. And actually, that is where, we do want to support children to understand at the right age. We don't want to demonize or try and teach all these things around health too early, because children just don't have a brain that can compute all of that. And you don't want children thinking I'm bad because I had a piece of chocolate. Yeah. That's not a healthy, a healthy diet doesn't matter if they don't grow up with a healthy relationship with food. Absolutely. Because they won't eat well. Yeah. And I think there were lots of adults with lived experience will tell you that. Yeah. So,
it's kind of hard not to have this black and white thinking, isn't it? Of good food and bad food.
Yeah. All food has a place. And chocolate can be great because I enjoy sitting and eating it when we're having a movie night. And that brings me joy because I'm also around my parents. And it tastes nice, and that makes me happy. Like that's, all of those things are okay. So we just don't want to give it any extra shine than it already has. And try wherever we can to just not give it in reward for things, we're not going to give it anything extra that it doesn't need. And including now and again as part of a balanced diet, fine, because the reality is our kids are going to grow up in a world with these foods. Yes. So we want to give them the skills of how to navigate it, that they can sit and enjoy it. Now and again, we can model that balanced diet. They don't have to be completely restricted because the forbidden fruit is always the one we end up going back to. Yeah. And it is interesting. I think it's also just remembering that, like, some of the allure of them, lots of parents will be like, Lucy, like, they're addicted to sugar. And I'm like, there's no evidence that children get addicted to sugar. Is it palatable? Yes. Do you enjoy sweets and chocolate and cake? Most people would say, yes, they do. But also, it's the way it's even marketed and shown to children. And there's a really interesting example I was fascinated by with my little girl a few weeks ago, who hasn't really ever had sweets because we're not a sweet household. I've not been bothered about that. And we were at a party, and from a children's entertainer, she won the best dancing, which was amazing and very funny. But he gave her a bag of sweets. Yeah. And he was like, can she have them, whilst he was giving them to her? And I thought, well, I'm not going to say no now because I'm making a big deal out of this. But what was really interesting to me is she brought them over to me and she said, Mummy, can we open them? And I said, what are they? And she said, I don't know, but I want to eat them. Right. Which is interesting. Yeah. So she has never had sweets before. Yeah. Ever. I don't think that I know of anyway. Ask her dad. Hasn't had sweets before. And she knew she wanted them because there's bears on the packaging and because they're bright and they're colourful. Like, She's not addicted to sugar. She never had it before, but she still wants it.
Yeah.
So I think it's just, there are some things as parents, unfortunately, we can't control. All of that is out there. And, I'd say as a tip with that, I often say to parents, even things with snack foods, if you can, remember that your child is being marketed to too. The baby and toddler aisle is that colour, not for our benefit.
Yeah. Yeah, you said right.
Decant things out of packets, remove some of those cues that make it desirable, that make it fun and all that stuff that kids love.
Yeah.
And see if we can dampen some of that down too. But in short, balance and think about the long term here, not just, the short term, if that makes sense, in terms of, again, that controlling to a point, because we've got to teach them how to navigate these foods in a healthy and sustainable way for life.
Absolutely. Okay, so have you got any tips then for on-the-go healthy snacks that we could be offering to little ones?
Yeah, oh my gosh, loads. I mean, it will depend on what your child does and doesn't eat and potentially any allergies. I mean, this sounds such like a boring dietitian thing to say, but I'm just like, fruit, like, things that are easy that come in skins, like tangerines, apples, those sorts of things are absolutely great. If you've got older kids, you can do, often we'll do like a homemade like trail mix, will just be like dry cereal pieces and raisins and, pretzels, and, you can put some other things in there. Kids, if they can have nuts, 5+ well on, you might have some nuts in there or seeds. You can sort of build a little bit of your own sort of trail mix that might be fun and exciting. Good old things like breadsticks, oatcakes and crackers, but just think about what you can add to them. So cream cheese, nut butter, like if you like making things like chia jam, stuff like that, you can sandwich them together like nut butter and chia jam. My daughter loves those. And then accept that sometimes it's just going to be an on-the-go snack. And I really want to keep it pragmatic. I don't want to think that, not everyone has time to make lots of wonderful batch-made snacks all of the time. If you do, great, go for it. I'm definitely a mum who sometimes a 10 out of 10 for that, and I'll feel super organised. And then, the 80% rest of the year, I'm just flying by the seat of my pants.
Yeah, I'm
and that. Grabbing things. And don't remember, it doesn't need to go, like chuck in some cubes of cheese and, so like half a sandwich, you can add things to that. Again, like I said, dry cereal, fibre, vitamins, minerals, that sort of thing that's going to be easy to go. Or just, if you've got somewhere where you can heat things up, or you can have some leftover dinner and it's now pasta salad, not hot pasta.
Yeah.
All of that works.
Something like that as well.
Great. Just don't overcomplicate it is what I would say. And again, it's not really about perfection. If you can combine food groups, that's often helpful too. So if you think about, here's an opportunity to have some fruit and veg. Here's an opportunity to have some carbohydrates and maybe some protein or dairy, yogurt, cheese, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But keep it simple and keep it, small.
Yeah. Okay. What's your take then on a clean plate? Should we be encouraging our children to finish the plate, or just...
I think you know what I'm going to say, don't you?
Intuitively stop when they're done.
I'm a big fan of a no on that.
Because we were all raised that way, weren't we? Finish your plate and then you could have that dessert.
Yeah. And
so
it's interesting.
why we're changing.
We're changing that, because I say, so the biggest thing I turn around to parents and say, and I would ask you to ask yourself, is who's telling you when you're full?
Yeah.
You would be astounded if anybody else was trying to tell you how your body felt. You'd be like, no, I don't want any more. Stop trying to get me to eat anymore. I'm full.
Yeah.
Your child is always going to be the best judge of how their body is feeling. And children, most children, I will caveat that, most children are very good at regulating their own appetite. They are very, that's from a baby.
Yeah.
It's so innate. It's like after you've got through those first hazy days and sort of tuning into life outside of the womb, they are fantastic. It's biologically driven. Now, there'll be a group of children who find that much more difficult, and there can be things that interfere with appetite regulation, which I'll touch on in a minute. But most children are brilliant at listening to their appetite.
Do you think, though, some parents worry that their children don't eat enough? That's, in my experience, some parents genuinely really worry about that. So they try to encourage their children to eat that little bit more.
They do. And to those parents, I often say, how much is enough? No parent has an answer at that point for me.
No,
it's really interesting. And I'm not doing it to try and trip anybody up.
Yeah.
It's a genuine, tell me what's enough.
Yeah.
Because it's not tangible and it won't be the same for any child. What would be enough for a 2-year-old who's growing on the 2nd centile would be very different to a 2-year-old who's growing on the 91st centile. They're both 2. They're both growing beautifully along their own centile lines.
Yeah.
Genuinely, there'll probably be about a 50% difference in the amount of energy those children need.
Yeah.
But you sit them next to the other 2-year-old and you're like, whoa, they've eaten loads more. And we get into that comparison. We get into that actually lots of parents overestimate how much children need to eat. And we've got good research that shows actually we over-egg it.
And my children eat differently as well. So they might have 2 or 3 days where I'm like, oh my goodness, I can't believe how much they eat.
You're eating out of house and home,
But then they might have like a 10-day stint where I feel like, oh, you've barely eaten a thing. But they seem just as fine. So you kind of have to just go with the highs and the lows of what they are eating.
You so do. And I say, because that goes against our predictable, I am consciously involved in my decision making around food, and I have breakfast, lunch and an evening meal every day, right? Regardless of how much I might have eaten across the last week. Yeah. Children don't.
No.
They're not bound by those rules.
No.
And actually we really want to encourage them to listen to their internal cues, not be driven by, don't trust your body because everyone's always told you to eat more. Don't listen to that. Listen to when the plate's empty. Listen to when mum says stop, or dad says stop, or nanny says stop. We don't want that.
No.
Jesus, no. We want them to listen to their bodies. And I think it's that the worry about enough is often, are they going to grow okay? Are they growing okay? If they are, then they are getting enough. Exactly like you say, appetite is this wild ride for children. You know, their growth changes, their activity levels change, you know, how hot it is and their appetite goes down changes, but they're brilliant at regulating, and they will go up and they will go down. They're not a 24-hour clock that just resets at 6 a.m. and is like, I need to eat 1,000 calories today. Because they won't do it like that.
No.
You know, they'll have loads one day and hardly any the next. We've had this. My daughter's well in a photosynthesis stage, as we call it in our house, when I'm like, I genuinely think she's had half a peach and like some grated cheese today.
Yeah, that's it.
She's fine. You know, they're fine. You know, when you're like, I'm not fine.
Yeah.
When you understand that that's normal, it really eases the pressure as parents. You know,
but like you say, sometimes as well, it is that pressure from other people, isn't it? Because my 4-year-old will go through phases of, he's really like a 2 meal a day kid, which again is my only child like it and has been a learning curve to me. So we went through a massive phase of not eating breakfast, a massive phase of not eating dinner. But I would hand him over to his little preschool and he's had no breakfast, and I'd feel like a failure because he's had no breakfast, but he just didn't want it. But he would eat a really big dinner. So I think he literally ate enough to fill himself up for a long period of time.
Kids do that. Got some kids who just aren't morning kids.
No.
Like adults who are not morning adults. You know, I had a friend stay for the weekend and I was sat eating breakfast with my daughter at like 7 a.m. and she was like, I don't know how you can do that. and I think this is it. They're not little robots.
No.
And they're not all the same.
No.
And they're not the same as us. We've got years of experience with food. We've got all the stuff that we've learned and managed. Most kids are getting enough. And actually, again, it comes back to that, like, how can I as an adult and as a parent trust my child? You know, and there will be caveats to that. You know, if you really feel like your child has got challenges with their appetite, a few questions I'd ask: are they pooing regularly? Because kids who are chronically constipated or constipated often don't feel as hungry. Kind of makes sense. If you've ever been constipated, you feel quite full. Children who are, for example, iron deficient will often have a reduced appetite. And there will be children, for example, like neurodivergent children, who some groups of neurodivergent children will really struggle to tap into the information their body is giving them. You know, these, you know, sometimes might be the kids who go outside and it's -2 and they don't want to coat. May also struggle to tap in with hunger and fullness cues. And so we need to create that routine for them so that they can have predictable opportunities to eat. But for the most part, children are great at listening to their appetite. And the more we can trust that, generally I find the less stress there is around meal times, the more acceptance of how they eat. And ironically, when you drop all of those things, when we become more accepting, because we're more relaxed around food, children tend to do better.
Yeah, I get that.
Because they feel safe. Because it's that lovely thing that we were talking about earlier, is if you're not okay at a mealtime, if you're stressed, if you are in their space, if you're trying to correct, if, you know, all your emotions are pouring out into your behaviour, because that's what they are. Your child is sensing something is off, and immediately that felt safety, which is that root that you need at meal times, is gone. Because they rely on us, they co-regulate. You're okay, I'm okay. You're okay, I'm okay. And the moment one of us isn't, okay, something's amiss here. I'm not safe. So I know it's, you know, not as simple as being like, just be chilled. At dinner time, because that can be hard. It's a bit like being a swan for some parents, where they're like, under the surface they're paddling, like, okay, Lucy's told me, and on the like top they're a graceful swan. But that's not easy every time, and it goes back to why filling your own your own cup up is really important, because actually we can't hold space for our children's emotions and challenges if we're really struggling to even hold our own.
Absolutely. So what about all children then who have different food preferences? Is it okay to cook different meals for each of them, or should we really be sticking to serving one meal?
I mean, you've got to do what works for your family. What I try and suggest to parents, and this again does require a bit of sort of planning, is to, where you can, have meals where, I love a deconstructed meal. I love the idea that we can family style serve things as much as possible. It isn't always possible, but where you can.
Yeah.
And what I would say is, are there elements within a meal that you're sitting and sharing together that will suit lots of the kids? You know, if they all do pasta, if they all do rice, if they all quite happy to have tortilla chips, whatever, make sure some of those foods are on the table that suit everybody. Perhaps change in and sub in some of the foods that some will eat and some don't.
Yeah.
And then you're probably also going to have stuff on there that you want to eat that they don't eat at all yet, right? And that there's an opportunity to engage with all of those things. Where you can do that, it can be really, really helpful, just so you're not making 3 meals every single night, but also so we're providing that opportunity for exposure and learning.
Yeah.
So that they are having and seeing and being around some things that they don't eat, so that they can start to build some confidence with those foods. But it's not always easy. And again, I'm not here to say you must do it this way every time, because some days we're all just getting by, aren't we?
Yeah.
And we just want everybody fed so we can all go to bed, right?
Absolutely.
But where you can, if you can create meaningful, I always say to parents, like, quality sometimes over quantity. If you can create meaningful opportunities throughout the week where you all come together, there's at least one thing on the table everybody will eat, and that's not too complicated to do. Then do it that way and see if they can, and they get choice. Kids love bringing stuff to their plate, serving themselves, because it feels like, I decide.
Yes.
And that's what they want, right?
Yeah, my kids love that. We will tend to have, because all mine like slightly different. I've got one child that's very, very fussy. So we'll kind of have that core thing that is on everybody's plate. Yeah. And then the kind of sides can really be picked. So that might be peas or corn, or for him it might be his fruit, and then the choice of different potatoes. So although it's cooking quite a lot, I would like to reduce it. I'm like, at least everyone's got the core thing. And then for him, that often it only is that. But then the others aren't being deprived of some of the more variety that they're willing to try.
Willing to try. It's again about providing that opportunity, isn't it? And over time, he'll probably pick up on what everybody else is, else is doing. But and I just, I always say to parents, like, don't worry about it being like perfect. Like, if you've got a random bowl of Wotsits with your korma, it doesn't matter. Like, it's just food. And letting some of that stuff go, well, that doesn't go with that, but that wouldn't fit with a Mexican night. Who cares? Like, nobody cares. No one's sitting looking over your mealtime going, oh, I wouldn't have served that with that. Just be okay with like random stuff on the table. Pull bits together. God, for dinner last night, we were just literally was like a fridge raid, and I was just like, what even is all of this?
Sometimes
it's literally just chuck it on the table and go for it, and let the rules, and again, I've said it lots of times today, like that sort of perfection go. People, children do not eat like you think they eat, or certainly not what social media suggests. Like most of the time.
Lovely. So do you have any final words of advice for the listeners today?
I think I would say, first things first, you're doing amazing, and you'll be doing so much better a job than you probably feel like you are. And whilst it will feel counterintuitive not to put first attention on your child, sometimes around food and eating, we need to put first attention on ourselves. Go, what's worrying me? Do I need some help with this? What can I do to look after myself? And so how I can come to a mealtime to make them a nice place to be, and feed myself and feed my child, and just bring it back to connection first. And that always surprises people, because everyone's like, but I want you to tell me how to give them more vegetables. And I'm like, that comes. That always comes after some of this other stuff's done.
It's such a common theme I hear in every podcast I sit here in, is connection. It's the root to everything.
Connection. Step back so they can step up.
I love that.
It's funny, After years of dietetics, I spend a lot of time talking about parenting.
Brilliant. Lovely. Well, thank you so much. I feel like there's a lot we can take from that podcast there that's going to be really beneficial. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you for having me.